Mark, what made you realize that pricing is less about spreadsheets and more about the psychology? Was there a moment when this clicked in a way you couldn't unsee?
Oh my God, I've never thought about that before. I still think that pricing is a lot about spreadsheets, right? But because um, I work a ton in B2B pricing, and I could define value in one really simple way, and that is value is measured in incremental profit. And so if we're going to get to incremental profit for my customer, that's spreadsheets.
Mark, like now in last 1 or 2 years, all I see on LinkedIn is AI is doing this, Gen AI is doing that. Now, if I create a scenario, let's say OpenAI hands you ChatGPT with no pricing. You're starting from zero. What would be your first move for this?
Could I just quit? Winning new customers. They don't know that you had an old price. So just raise the price. There's nothing hard about it. You just do it. If you're losing way too much business to competitors because you raised your price, then maybe you shouldn't have raised your price, right? But you'll get feedback quickly and you can bring your price back down. So it's super easy to raise prices on new customers.
Hi, all. Welcome to the Priceless Conversation, the podcast where we navigate through pricing, product management, automation, and AI. We do this with a mix of wit, wisdom, and some dashboard war related stories. I'm Satya. I'm a scientist who found her way in the world of AI and product management. And yes, I still use a lot of research data and try connecting a lot of dots across various domains to solve problems.
Thanks, Satya. And I'm Amit. I work in product and pricing, helping teams decide what to build and how to charge for it. I ask the hard questions and share lessons from the field. Glad you're tuning in. Our guest today is Mark Stiving, a globally respected expert in pricing and the founder of Impact Pricing. If you think pricing is just about numbers, this conversation will offer you a very different lens. Mark walks us through why so many pricing choices go wrong before any figures appear. We talk about how customers judge value, why confidence matters, and where product teams often misstep when trying to monetize without grasping the thinking behind a buyer's decision. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks, Satya. This is going to be fun.
Yes. So, the first question, Mark, what made you realize that pricing is less about spreadsheets and more about the psychology? Was there a moment when this clicked in a way you couldn't unsee?
Oh my God, I've never thought about that before. What a great, horrible question. Thanks, Amit. I still think that pricing is a lot about spreadsheets, right? But because um, I work a ton in B2B pricing, and I could define value in one really simple way, and that is value is measured in incremental profit. And so if we're going to get to incremental profit for my customer, that's spreadsheets. But besides that, there's a whole bunch of things that are going on behind the scenes that we just don't understand. And even if we stuck with the incremental profit, it still comes down to what's the real problem I'm trying to solve? What are the results I'm going to get if I go solve that problem? And those don't sit on spreadsheets unless you happen to type a lot of words into spreadsheets. And so when did I realize all that? I would have to say it happened when I was teaching for Pragmatic. So I was teaching product management and I taught them how to teach a pricing course. And during that whole process, I'm sitting here trying to struggle with this concept of product management, which you guys are experts at, and I'm not. But the concept came, how do you decide what you're going to build next? And it really came down to what's the problem? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And when I learned that and I pulled that into all of my pricing thinking, it truly changed almost everything I do.
Wow.
I'm asking something that's been asked to you multiple times.
Please.
So you moved through academia to entrepreneurship to various corporate roles before you became the world recognized pricing educator. If you look back, What is the most common thread that helped you build such a conviction in the pricing field?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer a slightly different question than you asked because I don't think there's a single thread that says here's what pricing means or here's how I get to pricing. But when you sit where I am today and you look back, here's what I could say. Every single job I ever had helps me understand pricing today. So if you think about the fact that I actually started as an electrical engineer, I mean, I was a horrible engineer, don't get me wrong, but I started as an electrical engineer. And trying to figure out how we're going to build products and what's important in building products, we care about that a lot when we start thinking about pricing and what's the value of the product that we're going to deliver. Then I moved into sales. Again, I was a horrible salesperson. And as a horrible by the way, here's my engineer joke for you. Do you know how you tell do you know how you can tell an extroverted engineer? He's the one looking
No.
at the other person's shoes. Okay.
Yes,
So then I was a horrible salesperson, and God, I feel like I want to share way too much information.
that's okay.
I remember being a salesman and listening to audio tapes, right? Motivational tapes. And Zig Ziglar was one of my favorites. And he would come on and he had this line, and I swear I thought about this line so much, but I never really understood it. And the line he would say is, you can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. Right now, you look back at that, and now I get it. Right. I mean, I'm old and I know what that means. But at the time, it's like, well, I don't know what a CEO wants. I don't know what a CFO wants. I don't know what. And so after you've experienced all of the different roles I've had, I now have this ability to say, I get it. I know what a CEO wants. Oh, I get it. I know what a CFO wants. I get it. I know what an engineer wants. And that's what pricing is really all about, is trying to say, what is it that all these other people want? And thank you for asking that question because I'm now going to go write a blog on that topic.
Yes. Mark, you've said that at oftentimes, you've spoken about value and pricing and value are entwined, and that value is what customer is willing to pay. But in oftentimes, it's in a lot many more times, what happens in some of the product teams is that they get reduced to a price test or a last minute decision. How do you help them understand this value before they start discussing price?
Yes. I'm trying to decide what question I want to answer there. So the way you help them is you have to understand your own value. And can I say, with almost every single company I've ever worked with, they don't understand the value of their product. And I know that seems shocking, but it's so true because I said these words earlier on, but here's what value really means. Value is the result of solving problems. Value is the result of solving problems. Now, the question is, what problems are you solving? And do you know how many people can answer that question? Almost nobody. But as soon as you can start to answer the question, what problem are we solving? Now I can relate with my buyer. I can relate with my customer. Oh, you have this problem. Got it. If we could solve this problem, what kind of results do you think we might get? And now we're looking at KPIs, right? What's the KPI we're about to go move? And we're getting their thinking in the direction. By the way, this is what they want to think. They just haven't gone through the process. They're using your buyer's using heuristics or something else in their head, and they're making guesses as to what they think the right answer should be. But when you can help walk them through the problem, the results, and then the value is, hey, if I can move this KPI from A to B, how much more profit do you make? That's value.
Understanding that a little bit more deeply and taking, another quote from what you mentioned some time back is that, and this is around the B2B segment, which you're expert at, is that B2B companies leave an average about 13% of value on the table because of weak pricing. Where do you see pricing is more broken? In this B2B software companies that move too fast to time and talk about this concepts of time to value, customer lifetime value, or traditional industries or traditional companies where nobody questions or they want to have these old models which continue with the old pricing mechanism. Where is it broken more?
So they each have their own brokenness, if that's okay. And so it's hard to say this one's worse than that one. The thing about software, I don't think of them as broken so often because one of the things that I believe wholeheartedly is it's impossible to price perfectly. right? A perfect price is I would read your mind and I would know how much you're willing to pay, and that's what I would charge you. And I just can't do that. I can't read your mind. And by the way, if I could read Amit's mind and I could read Satya's mind, do I have systems in place where I could charge each of them different prices? Right. And so it's just impossible to be perfect. What I like about software is they are moving so rapidly and they often are testing pricing. They're often testing pricing models. I think the companies who aren't testing, who aren't working at trying to get better tomorrow than they are today, that's a big problem in software, right? Where they set something and they just leave it and don't continue to innovate their pricing as they innovate their products. Now let me go back to the traditional companies, and this is just sad. And when I think of a traditional company, let's think of it as a physical goods company, a hardware company. They're making something, and almost every one of them still prices using cost plus pricing, right? And the thing about cost plus pricing is it has nothing to do with how much buyers are willing to pay. It has nothing to do with how much value you're delivering to your customer.
And that hurts.
It hurts a lot, right? So I think those people have a really hard time. But the other thing that happens in hardware companies is, let's assume you've got two hardware companies building something really similar. Both of them are using cost plus. And so they've essentially competed the pricing down to cost plus some number. Where if both of them were using value-based pricing, they would both have much higher prices and there would be more profit in the industry.
Thank you.
You have designed and taught a framework around subscription value. And what's one module or a technique that gets the most aha moment in your sessions around these frameworks?
I'd say the framework that I like the most, because it gets the most ahas, right? Because it's so insightful to people, is we want to think about how different buyers get value. And there's essentially two different buyers, and those two different buyer types also are associated with three revenue buckets that we have to manage as a company. So those three revenue buckets, if you've been in subscriptions at all, you've heard acquisition, retention, and expansion. I like to use the phrase win, keep, and grow, right? We like to win customers. We need to keep customers. We need to grow customers. And so when we think of win, keep, and grow, win is all about new customers. So when we think about customer types, there's a customer type of new customers. They're not a current customer of ours. When we think about keeping and growing, that has everything to do with our current customers. And so we need to treat those customers differently. And so I often am teaching subscription companies how to raise prices. And here's the trick to raising prices, given what I just told you. Winning new customers. They don't know that you had an old price. So just raise the price. There's nothing hard about it. You just do it. If you're losing way too much business to competitors because you raised your price, then maybe you shouldn't have raised your price, right? But you'll get feedback quickly and you can bring your price back down. So it's super easy to raise prices on new customers.
That's the secret sauce.
That is one. Here's the other one that's really good. And that is, think about if you could rank order all of your customers, all of your current customers, based on how much value they get from your product. And so you might, if you were measuring usage, you might say, oh, the ones with higher usage get higher value. The ones with lower usage get lower value. So if you could rank order all of them, the ones who use your product the most will willingly pay you more. You could raise their prices. The ones who use your product the least, if you raise their prices, they're likely to churn. They're likely to leave. And so rank order your customers, take the top, I usually work in 20%, 20 percentiles, right? So take the top 20%, raise their price, nothing happens. Take the next 20%, raise their price. Maybe you get a complaint or two. Take the next 20%, raise their price. Maybe someone churns. Maybe too many people churn. And now you say, yeah, let's stop raising prices, right? Let's not go down the path anymore.
But you still have got about 60% of customers paying more.
Yes. And that's the key. And you didn't lose a bunch of customers because you raised their price.
Yeah. Okay.
Mark, like I use, let's say, a lot of delivery apps. Okay, so for delivering my groceries or my vegetables. And if I am a loyal customer to this app, and if they increase my delivery fees, isn't that also going against it? Hey, I'm loyal. Can can it not decrease for me? Can the prices be not lesser for me? Why should the company increase just because I'm using it more?
So you're thinking about this from your own personal perspective for a second,
Yes.
right? And so you're thinking, I deserve a volume discount because I'm buying so much from them. And by the way, maybe you do. Here's what ends up happening. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me answer your question directly. You are willing to pay this delivery app more, and I know that because you use it so much, right? Now, I'm not saying you want to pay it more. Nobody wants to pay more ever, right? But you're willing to. But here's what could happen is, let's assume that there's two different delivery apps. So you could get your groceries delivered with using two different apps. You've been loyal to one app. They raise your price. You go to the other app and you say, hey, how much would you charge me for this? And so now you have this ability to potentially compete. And so if that's the case, what I might do if I was your first app is I might say, hey, you're a really loyal customer. Why don't we put together a loyal customer program so that you never ever switch? And then I'll find ways to raise your prices.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. Let me give you one more insight on that I find fascinating too, by the way, is I teach a concept called will I and which one. So most of the time when we buy something, we make two different purchase decisions. The first decision we make is, will I buy something in the product category, right? So you're asking yourself, will I have groceries delivered to my house using an app? You said, yes, I want to do that because I don't have time to go shopping. So then you say, which app am I going to go do? Which app will I use? Now, if you shop, so let's assume that every time you shop, you open up both apps and you say, which one gives me the better price for delivery? And then you choose the one that gives you the better price. Then you're making a which one decision every time. But you don't do that. You've got an app you're loyal to. You open it up, you look at the groceries, you order them, you say deliver it. So here's what that app knows. You aren't comparing prices to the competition. And so you are only making a will I decision. So they could, I don't know that they could start to raise your prices because of the fact that you never ever compare their price to their competitor's price. So this is us recognizing when our customers are only making will I decisions. In other words, they're not comparing us to a competitive alternative. And that shows us what their willingness to pay is. If you were super price sensitive, you would compare every time.
Very recently, I think there was a post on LinkedIn, and we connected on conjoint analysis. I remember you writing that it is not the only tool for willingness to pay. And I wanted to bring that up today and understand whether it's conjoint analysis or whether it's Van Westendorp. When should, one stop pretending that we need more data or more analysis, or how do these tools work for us?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to make everybody in the world in pricing mad at me. Thanks for asking that question, Amit. So I almost never do pricing studies. I almost never ask my clients to do pricing studies or pricing research. What I do is I try to say, how do we get better tomorrow than we are today? Because I never know what the price is going to be. Even if I ran the perfect pricing study, I still didn't get it right for a lot of different reasons. And so I don't think I'm ever going to be right with those. So what I want to do is I want to be better. And so how do I make good decisions being better? So that said, I love Van Westendorp for trying to put a price on something that has nothing similar to it. Right? If I've got something that I'm going to release that's like a new CRM, I'm going to look at the pricing of all the other CRMs and decide, hey, where do I fit relative to those? And because that's what my buyers are going to do, is they're going to look at other CRMs and say, how do you fit relative to those?
Yes.
But if I'm building something that's never been built before, then how do I put a price on that? And I don't mind Van Westendorp because it gets me in the ballpark.
True.
No way is it accurate. It gets me in the ballpark. I love conjoint, not for pricing, but I love conjoint more for trying to figure out what features go together with what packages for what market segments. I think
Yes.
that's a really powerful way. From a pricing perspective, I think it makes sense if you wanted to say, what are the relative prices between my different packages? I think that makes a lot of sense too. The problem I have with conjoint and Van Westendorp and any pricing study you want to do is it depends upon how much you, my respondent, understands the value of what I'm going to do for you.
Okay.
And salespeople selling products today can't explain the value of their products. right? How pricing
Yeah.
people think they can explain the value of their products just is odd to me. So that's probably my biggest pushback on all of the research techniques is I think that we our buyers, our respondents don't know the value. And so the answers they give us are the best answers they know, but we haven't taught them the right information yet. Let me say that slightly differently, if I may, because I really want to get this
Yep.
point across. This has nothing to do with research for a second, and let's just talk about sales. I've got a product, and I'm selling my product for $100, and
Uh-huh.
a buyer says to me, "Your product's not worth $100," so he's
Okay.
not going to buy it. And I say, "Oh, no, 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 but you didn't understand it does this and this and this and this and this." And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to work his perception of value above $100 so that he'll say, "Yep, I'll buy it." And so salespeople are constantly trying to convince buyers, or let's just say communicate the value of what they offer to buyers to get them over the willingness to pay hurdle. And so when we do
And
pricing research, we don't do that.
so let's say one of those bad product leaders listens to this podcast and then calls you and says that, okay, I heard you. You make a bit sense. Our pricing isn't working. And how do you reply to that? What is the first thing you ask them? How do you distinguish that it's a pricing failure, or a positioning failure, or maybe a segmentation issue, or maybe something else? But yeah.
I think that is such a great question, Amit. So here, think about a deal that we lose, right? So somebody doesn't buy something from us. Anytime a salesperson loses a deal, they tell you the price was too high. And by the way, they're right. The price was too high because we could have lowered the price and won the deal, right? We could have lowered the price to zero and won the deal. But what was also true is there wasn't enough value
Yeah.
because I could have somehow increased the value and won the deal, right? I could have attached gold coins to the product and won the deal.
Okay.
And so what we always have to ask ourselves is when we say our pricing isn't working, what that's really saying is buyers aren't buying our product and too many people are telling us our prices are too high. And what I would always come back with is how well are we explaining the value of our product? How well do we know the value of our, because if we don't truly understand the value of our product and we can't explain it to our customers, then yeah, our pricing's too high. But if we can get better at the value piece, then we can win deals at higher prices.
Maybe could you share some of an example around it, or how would it need in certain industry?
Well, so there's a lot of different decisions that we have to make. The decisions, when you asked the question, you brought up several areas where is it a positioning problem? Is it a product problem? Is it a market segmentation problem? And all of those could be true, right? Or one of those could be true. And so what we want to do is we want to have a process to start thinking about what does value mean to our customer? And then
Mm-hmm.
how do we organize our business decisions around what value means to our customers? I've crafted something I call a value architecture. I've written about it a couple of times. I don't know if you guys have seen that yet or not. But in the value architecture, it starts out at what's the market segment that we're going to go after? And so this is the highest level decision that companies have to make. Right? What's the segment that we're going to go after? And then once we've said, hey, we're going to go after this segment, what's the product portfolio look like? And now we have to decide what product or products are we going to build? And I usually recommend good, better, best. And how do we make those decisions? And then what's the pricing metric that we're going to use once we have a product portfolio? And then now we can get into, okay, what price do I charge? And am I going to do price segmentation? And am I going to allow different people to pay different prices? And how am I going to go implement all that? And all of these decisions are really important to being able to understand and capture value from our customers. So now let me give you the example that you asked for. LinkedIn. We all use LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a B2B thing. And so in the world of LinkedIn, actually, let me tell
Mm-hmm.
the story. I'm going to tell you a fictional story about LinkedIn. Okay. As in, I just made this story up. So 15, 20 years ago, LinkedIn got everybody to give them their resumes, and they charged $50 a month if you wanted extra access or extra search capability. And then somebody at LinkedIn started talking to customers and saying, hey, what do you use this for? And how much value do you get? And how much money are you making or saving because you're using our product? And some really smart person said, you know what? Recruiters are making a ton of money using LinkedIn. And so they said, well, what do recruiters need? So by the way, we just defined a market segment, right? To
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn, recruiters is a market segment.
Yeah.
So what do recruiters need? Well, so recruiters need the ability to coordinate inside the company so different people can interview them and different people can give feedback. And there's one central place where we get all that feedback located. And so we could build a few features around the fact that we've got resume storage and search, because I mean, LinkedIn is truly resume storage and search, right? So we can build a few features around that to make recruiters' jobs easier. And so we'll sell a product to recruiters and we'll make it expensive. And recruiters were like, "Oh, this is awesome! I love this because it helps me do my job, and you know how much money I'm making and saving because I'm buying this from you." So it was really great. And then LinkedIn says, "Well, you know, we've got some companies that have really big problems and some companies have really smaller problems. What if we built a good, better, best recruiter package so that the big companies pay us a ton of money and the really small companies still buy our recruiter package and we make more than those people just paying us $50 a month?" Okay. Then somebody said, "Oh my gosh, that works so well with recruiters. We should do that for salespeople." And they created Sales Navigator. Okay.
And we should sell it higher.
Well, it turns out recruiters pay about 10 times more than salespeople do, right? Because recruiters get so much value out of having access to resumes. Salespeople get value. Salespeople pay more than the rest of us. If we're in the professional category, which is like everybody, salespeople pay more than we do. But
the recruiters are the biggest. So if LinkedIn is a big professional party, it is funded by recruiters.
It is. It is. But that's to show you how, you know, if we want to think about, I want to put a price on LinkedIn, how do I do that? Well, I do that by understanding what value am I delivering to my customer. And when I start to look at value, I can then say, oh, we've got this one market segment, we'll call it recruiters, that gets so much more value than anybody else. We can craft a product portfolio for them and we could sell it at a really good price. And by the way, recruiters aren't going to buy Sales Navigator because it's got a different set of features.
Yeah. And they did it so well. I don't think other social platforms, X, Twitter, or even Instagram, could create that customer segment and give features based on the various customer segments. So LinkedIn was the one that truly nailed it.
Yes, so I think LinkedIn wins because of the fact that it's B2B and they're delivering real value to companies. I mean, they're helping companies make money.
Yes.
I would guess, by the way, I don't use any other social media than LinkedIn. So I'm not an expert on any of the other ones, but I would guess that companies like Instagram or Facebook probably have market segments, but their market segments aren't at users, they're at influencers, they're targeted at sponsors, right? And so they've probably got a series of market segments where they get different amounts of money. They've built different products for those different types of people.
Yeah.
And so that's what we want to do all the time is think about who's getting value from what we do.
It's such great insights.
So, Mark, like now in last 1 or 2 years, all I see on LinkedIn is AI is doing this, Gen AI is doing that. Now, if I create a scenario, let's say OpenAI hands you ChatGPT with no pricing. You're starting from zero. What would be your first move for this?
Could I just quit? Okay. So this is actually a really hard problem. And it actually goes along with the LinkedIn story I just told you. Let's define the types of products as two types of products. There are platforms and there are solutions. So LinkedIn, before they built Recruiter, is a platform, right? Because you can do almost anything on it. You can solve so many different problems with it. ChatGPT is a platform, right? So you can do almost anything with it today. And so it's really, really hard to price a platform. What ends up happening is, and especially for the AI companies, this is going to be the case, that when you have a platform, we end up with multiple platforms competing, we're going to compete down towards cost, right? Because we all want the most users. And so to get more users, I lower my price. And so everybody's going to drive this down to cost because there's no real value. I mean, there's tons of value, but there's no real value story that I can tell. But now let's take ChatGPT, and instead of thinking, how do I price ChatGPT, which is really hard because it's a platform, now ask yourself, how do I price Grammarly, right? Grammarly uses AI. It has a very specific solution to a very specific problem. It delivers value. And by the way, I think I pay more for Grammarly than I do for ChatGPT. even though ChatGPT does a lot more for me than Grammarly does, right?
Yes.
And so almost anytime you look at an agent, if the agent, the AI agent, is solving a specific problem that is quantifiable and we can define what that value looks like, it is so much easier to price that than it is to say, how am I going to price a platform?
Say that it would take still some time for ChatGPT to come to the optimal pricing, because we still hear stories that they need a lot more funds to run ChatGPT. The pricing or not enough people are paying for it right now.
I don't think we'll get to an optimal pricing for ChatGPT. We don't get to optimal pricing for any product, by the way. But I don't think we get to optimal pricing for ChatGPT for a very long time. And that's because innovation happens so rapidly in this AI space today. Theoretically, we should be paying a lot more today for ChatGPT than we were a year ago, because it does so much more than it did a year
Yeah.
ago. But we don't. And so it's the competition that's driving this. They're trying to monetize it to some extent. They're keeping costs under control only by, if you've got a $20 a month subscription, which is the one I use, they will throttle you once you use too much. They don't tell you that,
Yes.
but they'll slow you down. And so it's their way of saying, okay, we're going to control our costs. If you want more access, you can give us the $200 a month package.
Or maybe you are one of our most loyal customers. We are going to charge you more.
Yes, yes. So pricing ChatGPT itself is hard. Pricing the agents is easier, but can I say everybody is struggling with that today? And here's why everybody's struggling with that today. I find this so fascinating. Oh my gosh. There's a thing in pricing called the pricing metric. The pricing metric is, what do you charge for? And so if you think about Salesforce, Salesforce charges per seat or per user, right? So how many salespeople, how many admin, how many people are going to use the software? And they've been doing this forever. What if Salesforce could create an agent that would reduce the number of salespeople necessary? It kind of hurts their business model, doesn't it?
Yes.
And so what ends up happening is when you start to think about AI agents, what they're doing is they're automating processes. They're taking people out of the process. Now, that's not to say that people aren't going to be used elsewhere or do something else, but to do the function they were doing before, the function that was adding value for the company, there's not a seat anymore. And so I can't charge for seats. The thing is, half of all SaaS companies were charging for seats. So all of a sudden, I've got this new technology, this new methodology that says, hey, I'm going to do what I used to do, but you can do it without people. Well, now how do I price that? And so coming up with what this pricing metric is really hard. And part of the problem is that companies don't change rapidly, and AI is forcing them to change immediately in the way they do this.
Let's say for the pricing metric and with the current AI world, which is changing rapidly, I'm saying that let's take a leap of faith, something happens, some magic happens. And how do you see the pricing metric or the system changing from a decade from now? So, what idea or question do you hope the current generation still try to carry with them on pricing?
I will predict for you that ChatGPT will be priced exactly the same way it is today, right? And here's why I'm going to say that. If you look at other things that are really, really popular from a subscription perspective, right? They're priced almost exactly like ChatGPT is priced. So think about your Netflix account, right? You pay a monthly fee and you can watch as many movies or as few movies as you want. And they don't know if you're watching series or movies or dramas or whatever it is, right? You can watch whatever you want, and it's a flat fee. Think about your cell phone. Now, I don't know what it is around the world, but I can tell you what it is in the US, right? It used to be that we were charged per minute, and we were charged for long distance phone calls, and we were charged for, right? Nowadays, I pay a flat fee and I get what I want, right? It's the same bill every month.
Yes.
And so what that says to me is that as these industries evolved, they went to, hey, we can give you a flat fee for a set amount of services, go do it. And so there's no doubt in my mind that that's the way buyers want to buy. And so that's the way companies like ChatGPT are going to end up selling. Now, do they make other moves or, I don't know what word I'm looking for. Do they change a little bit on the way? Maybe, but I'll bet they come back to this. One of the things you see a lot in agents today is, and these are agents that aren't well defined yet, is something called token-based pricing, right? And so token-based pricing is essentially cost plus pricing. And they do this because they don't know how much their buyers are going to use. They don't know how hard the queries are going to be, how many queries they're going to have. And so they do token-based pricing. And that's like charging for a minute in cell phone usage.
With all this, so I'm just saying that it will get cheaper and cheaper for some aspects that I'll start to pay, but it might be indirectly very expensive when I see overall how much I'm spending on AI agents, even if it is token based. Like today's API pricing is also something that's on token based, but it would be also hidden costs that I would not know today as a consumer, as a customer. Isn't it? Like it might pile up, but in a very different manner, may not be with the same tools.
Yeah. Well, and so in a lot of cases, you don't care. Let's pretend for a moment, and I have no idea how they would do this or why they would do this, but let's pretend for a moment that Netflix integrates AI into Netflix so that it does something. I don't know what it's going to do. Maybe automatically you choose your next film and do it way better than it's ever done it in the past, or whatever it happens to do. But you don't pay extra for that, right? That's just part of your fee. And so we're going to see AI, the way AI gets implemented in products is really varied today. And so we see the platforms, right? We see the chat GPTs of the world or the Claudes of the world. And so this is one way to use AI. Then we see co-pilots. So if you're using Microsoft Office and you've got Copilot running beside you, that's a different way to implement AI. We see agents like Grammarly. That's a different way to implement AI. And then we could just have AI buried into something that we don't even know it's there, but it's helping produce the function. And that's just a different way to implement AI. So there's lots of different ways to implement it. The question becomes, how much did it change your business model? If you're a company and you built it into your product now, or you're going to offer an AI something, how much did it change your business model? How much did it change the way you're delivering value to your customers? And so do you have to rethink your pricing now or not? That's what's really driving that.
You're on mute.
I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, Mark. This has been very, very insightful. It's kind of been a masterclass and very razor sharp. We covered points from value to content analysis to AI pricing. And you've helped us see pricing a bit more than numbers. It's a strategy, it's a psychology. And most of all, it's about value. Thank you so much for coming on our show today. If you would have to tell our listeners, where can they reach out to you?
It's easy to find me on LinkedIn. I post almost everything I do on LinkedIn. And then if you want to, you can always email me, mark@impactpricing.com. That's my website, impactpricing.com.
Thank you so much.
As a student of pricing, I've learned a lot today, Mark. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your story. And yes, to our listeners, please stay curious, connected, and give us your feedback on comments or reach out to us on LinkedIn. Thank you.
It was so wonderful talking to you, Mark.